I'm gonna make a video today, and it's gonna be about a lot of different things, primarily about a fanfiction website called Archive of Our Own, for which there has been a lot of research published already, but I'm gonna approach it from a little bit of a different perspective, and I'm also going to focus primarily on one specific group of fans, and that is people under the relationship tag, Neil Jostin/Andrew Minyard. So let's begin by defining what Archive of Our Own is for people who may not know. So, by their own definition, Archive of Our Own is a fan-created, fan-run, non-profit, non-commercial archive for transformative fan works. It features more than 53,000 fandoms, 5 million active users, and 10 million fan works. The most basic kind of way to understand fan fiction for people who aren't familiar with it is imagine you just watched a movie or you sat down to read a book and you didn't like the way that it ended. It ended abruptly, or people died that you didn't want to die, or characters that you wanted to be together weren't together. A lot of what fanfiction was in the early days was people who sat down and rewrote those endings so that they ended in a way that was acceptable to them. Today, fanfiction has become a lot more than rewriting. It's reinventing the universes, the characters that they're talking about. It's transforming those works and those characters into something completely different. In 2007, a user known as Astalat made a blog post on LiveJournal, basically sending out a request for the fanfiction community to create a central archive of our own. Something like animemusicvideos.org, something that would not hide from Google or any public mention, and would clearly state our case for the legality of our hobby up front, while not trying to make a profit off other people's IP, and instead only making it easier for us to celebrate it together, and create a welcoming space for new fans that has a sense of our history and our community behind it, which truly does sound like some kind of governmental proposition. Thus, Archive of Our Own, henceforth referred to as AO3, was born. By the way, it's called AO3 because it's Archive of Our Own. Of Our Own is 3 O's, so AO3. Hopefully, now you have a better understanding of what Archive of Our Own is. Now, let's dive into what is the Neil Jostin/Andrew Minyard relationship tag on that website. If you're an author uploading a fanfiction to Archive of Our Own, you have to tag your work. What that means is you put metadata on your piece of writing that tells the website what category to place this literature under. Most times you're going to have to tag the fandom that you're writing in. For instance, something like Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Star Wars. Likely, you're also going to have to tag the relationships that are being depicted in the fan work. A lot of fan fiction includes romantic relationships. On Archive of Our Own, you know that a fan fiction has a romantic relationship if the tag is name/name. Slash means it's romantic. So the Neil Jostin/Andrew Minyard tag on AO3 is a tag that includes any fan works that have been uploaded surrounding the topic of the romantic relationship between Neil Jostin and Andrew Minyard. The original intellectual property that this relationship comes from is a trilogy known as All for the Game, self-published by author Nora Sokovic. All for the Game is a trilogy about a young man named Neil Jostin who is on the run from his evil mafia boss father. But wait, there's more. I'm going to preface this right now and let you know that All for the Game has a whopping 31 trigger warnings associated with the 3-book trilogy. To put that into perspective, in George R.R. Martin's series, A Song of Ice and Fire, the book with the most trigger warnings is A Feast for Crows, which has only 15 trigger warnings, in comparison to All for the Game's 31. We're going to look at the interactions among this group of fans, how it's affected by AO3 and AO3's ethics, their morals, how the content affects the interaction between the users, so on and so forth. I scraped the metadata from 600 of the most recent Neil Jostin/Andrew Minyard fanfictions on Archive of Our Own. The data I collected helped guide my research and is going to make it easier for me to apply broad media concepts to this specific community. I was also able to ask some questions to two of the most prolific fanfiction writers in the community, Ominous and Mordax. When I analyzed the data I had found, using the help of AI and natural language processing, I found a lot of trends in the trigger warning usage of the community. In the top 20 tags by average kudos, which, by the way, are pretty much what likes or saves would be on another platform. The top 7 tags with the most kudos were all trigger warnings. Then, I looked at the tags not by popularity, but by frequency, and I found that the trigger warnings were in fact not the most used tags in the group. That being said, in the 608 fanfictions that I scraped, there were trigger warnings of some kind in 339 of them. The remaining 269 were either labeled, "Creator chose not to use archive warnings," or "Archive warnings do not apply." So why is it that fanfictions that do have trigger warnings perform better? I think the answer is twofold. One, that Archive of Our Own as a platform strongly encourages the use of proper tagging and proper trigger warnings. And two, that the content of Off the Game itself is so dark that its readers hold a greater value on trigger warnings. The community copies the structure of the platform. If there was ever a better time to introduce Marshall McLuhan, it would be now, so I will. McLuhan is often referred to as the father of media theorists. He wrote a number of novels that have shaped the way media is studied today and brought a lot of different ideas to the table, including the concept of media as extensions of human faculties. In Understanding Media, he said, "As an extension or outering of all of our senses at once, language has always been held to man's richest art form, that which distinguishes him from the animal creation," which basically means that language is a media that can extend us beyond what is otherwise natural biology. He also developed the slogan,
"The medium is the message, and it doesn't matter what we say on TV. Why are we all here tonight? And why am I asking this question?"
I didn't say it didn't matter what you asked on TV. I said that the effect of TV, the message of TV, is quite independent of the program. That is, there is a huge technology involved in TV which surrounds you physically.
Which essentially boils down to the idea that whatever medium or piece of technology you're using to create or interact with media is inherently affected, and he would argue defined by that structure. So, Archive of Our Own users are defined by the platform. AO3's morals, their ethics, shape how people use the website. McLuhan said, "This is merely to say that the personal and social consequences of any medium, that is, of any extension of ourselves, result from the new scale that is introduced into our affairs by each extension of ourselves, or by any new technology." So why is Archive of Our Own unique in terms of other fanfiction platforms? And not just fanfiction platforms, but media sharing entities in general. AO3 is run by a larger organization known as OTW, which means Organization for Transformative Works, a nonprofit fan activist operation that is sustained entirely by donations. In fact, during the latest donation drive AO3 held on April 10th, 2025, the website had a goal of reaching $75,000 in donations. In less than 4 days, they had instead risen $270,000. This is not an isolated example, and anyone in the community would be able to tell you that the actual donations far exceed the goals set by OTW every single time. During my discussion with Ominous, they seemed to agree with me. And obviously it works because they have these donation drives and they get filled within 2 days, and they get
even less. I feel like
Literally.
in an age where censorship is becoming more prevalent and we're in the rise of conservatism and everything, the drives almost do better.
Yeah.
Because they're so quick to be I think this last one, in a day, they'd hit not just their goal, they doubled it. It was crazy.
No,
and good. And I know And people, I've donated before. I didn't donate this last time, but I usually try to donate at least like $5 or $10, no matter how broke I am.
While donations are not required to use the archive, they are still able to fund themselves. So what does AO3 do with the money that they raise? According to their website, the OTW uses funds to purchase goods and services that cannot be provided by its volunteers, such as expenses related to operations and certain administrative costs. Like operational expenses include the purchase of software and server space to create and maintain the archive. Administrative expenses include a variety of items typical to a nonprofit organization, such as insurance, payment processor fees, and tax preparation and auditing services. Every person involved with the OTW does not make money off of the operation. They are all volunteer workers. Archive of Our Own also has made a pledge to users that advertisements will never appear on their platform, saying fans do not need to fear that their works might be purged from AO3 in order to make the site more attractive to its advertisers. As we said yesterday, because we depend on fans and not advertisers to fund our hosting costs, the archive can remain fully independent and accept as many fanish works as the servers can hold. Herbert Marcuse is another media theorist who wrote a book, One Dimensional Man, which pointed out a downward spiral in society towards one-dimensional thinking. That is when people are so enshrined in a system so deeply they cannot conceptualize ideas outside of it. He looks at this phenomenon and then points to capitalism. He points out that people are so immersed in capitalist society that on the most basic level, their ideas cement them as consumers. Marcuse discusses the idea of a false need, something that the system is telling you is necessary to your life, but in fact adds no value whatsoever to your existence. In One Dimensional Man, he says, the other dimension is absorbed into the prevailing state of affairs. The works of alienation are themselves incorporated into this society and circulate as part and parcel of the equipment which adorns and psychoanalyzes the prevailing state of affairs. Thus, they become commercials. They sell, comfort, or excite. Marcuse, after discussing all these issues, then tells us how to solve them. He calls for the Great Refusal. In the Great Refusal, people reject false needs, reject capitalist thinking, and embrace multidimensional thought. That should sound familiar, because it's exactly what Archive of Our Own does. AO3 acts as an example of the Great Refusal in practice. They embrace the idea of giving and mutual support for a common cause, regardless of whether there is profit to be made. McLuhan discussed the fact that money was also a prevailing factor affecting the creation of media, saying, money talks, because money is a metaphor, a transfer, and a bridge. Like words and language, money is a storehouse of communally achieved work, skill, and experience. However, AO3 does not need the validation of earning money in order to exist as a storehouse for work. The platform exists because a genuine need for it arose among a community. Ominous discussed what AO3's anti-capitalist sentiments meant to them in our interview.
I mean, I do think that the morals of AO3 and like just the way they approach everything, you know, whether or not you can discuss how fandom etiquette and how fandom culture has deteriorated or stayed the same, I think whether or not you realize it or not, the morals of AO3 have actually withstood a lot of it. Like at the end of the day, like AO3 is truly a sanctuary place for, there's no ads, there's no any kind of attempts to like make it a cog in the capitalist machine. And I think that that even as a like periphery, like a background statement that they make, like a silent statement, it helps because it's like so much of the world now is commercialized, and to have this like safe haven where that's not the case, I think it breeds creativity. I think whether or not people are aware, just the fact that AO3 exists as it is with the rules that it has makes people create more, and it makes people create more unique things as well.
In Filter World by Kyle Shaka, he mentions communities of consumption, a term that academics have used to describe the diverse groups of people that congregate online around a particular shared pursuit, whether swapping product tips or discussing avant-garde literature. It was not something that was brought into existence within the scope of our system. It was made real in spite of it. Fanfiction itself is a mode of multidimensional thinking. Its creators defy what they have been told in exchange for a new idea, one that has not been thought of before. Marcuse said, "Whether ritualized or not, art contains the rationality of negation. In its advanced positions, It is the great refusal, the protest against that which is. However, because AO3 exists outside of our everyday system, they must rely even more heavily on the rules and regulations created within the community. Things like trigger warnings, donation drives, or general fanfiction etiquette. There may be some doubt about the authenticity of this anti-capitalist thinking attributed to the fact that they are dealing in copyrighted intellectual property, so it could be said that they could not monetize the service even if they wanted to. That, however, is not true. See Wattpad. If you were to rank the popularity of fanfiction websites, Wattpad would probably be second on the podium underneath AO3. Their origins are vastly different from the archive. Wattpad started as an online ebook reading service. They'd always intended to make money off of the venture. It was originally only meant to host original pieces of writing, but they ended up incorporating fanfiction into their platform because they wanted to further cater to their user base, all of whom were obviously avid readers. In Filter World, media theorist Kyle Shaka discusses an experience he had with two different kinds of bookstores. He first discusses the new age Amazon bookstores which have popped up around the country. Shaka describes the interior, saying, "When I walked in for the first time, I was struck by the visual chaos. It did not have a bookstore's usual atmosphere of meditative calm. Instead, it more closely resembled a grocery store. All of the book covers were facing outward, side by side on the shelf like so many digital icons, and each book had a digital label below it, showing its respective rank. Similarly, you can look to the front page of Wattpad, where books are recommended to you based on top 10 in the US, hot Wattpad energy, or premium picks, which is in reference to Wattpad's subscription service, Wattpad Premium and Wattpad Premium Plus. These subscriptions allow you to browse Wattpad without ads, offer unlimited offline stories, and gives you opportunities for bonus Wattpad coins, which are essentially the in-house cryptocurrency of the site. Ironically, these are all things that AO3 offers to all of its users for free. Regardless, the similarity between Wattpad as an online fanfiction hosting site and the Amazon bookstore as an in-person literature shop are clear. Shaka said, "Like many things that operate on the scale of the internet, the bookstore was inhuman. It made recommendations based on the mass of data produced by all Amazon customers." In contrast, Shaka described his favorite bookstore in Brooklyn, McNally Jackson, saying, "Behind each arrangement, I felt the hand that selected the book, an individual intelligence, rather than a singular formula. They expanded the shopper's idea of what a particular category could contain. The archive functions the same way. Community members know that each fanfiction was handcrafted by a fanish person just like themselves. The main difference is that the recommendation system on Archive of Our Own could be described in one word: non-existent. There was no functionality for that on the platform. However, the closest thing is the tagging of people's works. If you like a fanfiction under the combined tags Neil Jostin / Andrew Minyard and Found Family, chances are you would probably like another fanfiction under those same tags. This system relies upon the mutually beneficial act of fanfiction authors to tag their works accurately. Authors on AO3 are encouraged to be as honest and comprehensive as possible with their tags, and are not afraid to do so because they will not be punished for writing about certain topics. Mordax shared the same sentiment in their responses. I think there's a general etiquette when it comes to navigating AO3 that has affected these interactions positively. This means not leaving critical comments, privating a bookmark if you have a maybe less than stellar note paired with it, and so forth. This saves the writers from seeing negative reviews about their work. I think this kind of mindfulness from AO3 and its users really positively affects the communities and writers. Also, AO3 is a very open site, allowing authors to post pretty much anything they want. But the etiquette means that the authors should use proper tagging to save readers from seeing things they aren't interested in. I think this freedom keeps a lot of the interactions on the website safe. Rather than censoring creative works, the site trusts that writers and users will be mindful of their content. This keeps integrity among the communities as opposed to a censored site, which might cause writers to be untruthful about the content of their work to avoid censorship. The connection between people on Archive of Our Own is one based on genuine trust in one another, to be kind, respectful, and courteous of every other user on the site. Negative interactions on the website are extremely rare because of this mentality. Ominous testified to this experience on the website.
I couldn't speak for everybody, but for me, I've had basically nothing but a positive experience. I don't think in my time in fandom I've received like a singular hate comment or criticism, which makes me sound like kind of an asshole, because people are like, oh, well, good for you. And it's like, no, I don't mean it that way. Like,
the culture of AO3, I do feel like this structure is a direct result of the anti-capitalist, anti-commercialized, and anti-formulaic approach that OTW has steadfastly defended since the website's conception in 2007. So, breaking it down even more, because AO3 is rejecting capitalism, they no longer have the structure of that system. Without the structure, the communities become even more malleable to the structure of AO3 itself, and the interactions themselves reflect the morals of the platform. One of the most important things in these guidelines is the existence of tagging, and accurate tagging. Filtering is a mutually beneficial action people are taking to maintain a non-commercialized space for community. In this way, the culture of Archive of Our Own is based upon mutual aid, volunteer work that arose out of a genuine need from the fanfiction community. Authors do not expect or receive compensation for the time they spend on their writings, but still take the time to uphold the structure of the archive for the sake of maintaining balance within the community. The Neil Jostin/Enderman tag itself is uniquely responsive to these efforts and reflects the positive experience of the website as a whole. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for watching Professor. And shout out to Ominous and Mordax. Thank you guys so much for agreeing to talk to me and give me answers to some of my questions. Also shout out to Mellodramat, who is the person that coded the AO3 scraper, and they helped me run it. So thank you to all of you who helped me along the way, and I hope you enjoyed.